Hi, hello viewers, warm welcome to my classroom. Today's topic, a poem for class 9th English, A Legend of the Northland, written by POETESS. Let's move to the class. Let's know about the poetess. POETESS was born in September 1824 in Ohio, United States. POETESS and her sister Alice were 19th century American poets who grew up writing together, Alice being the older by 4 years. They initially published their poetry jointly in 1848 and again in 1849. POETESS produced 2 collections under her own name. In 1854, she published poems and parodies, and then in 1867, poems of faith, hope, and love. She died on the 31st July 1871 at the age of 46. Let's have a look at the theme. The poem is like a legend. It refers to a historical story that is very old and has been orally passed from generation to generation. It mainly tells about the outcome of bad activities. In this poem, an old lady who was mean and greedy angered Saint Peter, and as a result, she was turned into a woodpecker by him. It teaches us a lesson that we should not be selfish and always help the needy. Hope you followed. Now let's pay attention on the summary of the poem. The poem is a legend about an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. The story goes on like this. One day, Saint Peter was preaching around the world and reached the door of a cottage where this woman lived. She was making cakes and baking them on a hearth. Saint Peter was fainting with hunger. He asked the lady to give him a piece of cake. The cake that she was baking then appeared to be too big, so she did not give him that cake. The second time she baked another smaller cake, but found it too big to give away. In the third attempt, she took an extremely little scrap of duff and rolled it flat. She had it as thin as a wafer, but was unable to part with that also. This angered Saint Peter a lot. He said that she was not fit to live in human form and enjoy food and warmth. He cursed her and transformed her into a woodpecker that had to bore in hard, dry wood to get its scanty food. She can be seen in the trees all day, boring and boring for food. Hope you followed. Let's have a look at the poem. Stanza 1. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. Stanza 1. Explanation. The Northland is an area near the North Pole where days are short because the sun's rays reach for very little time. Here, during the winter, the duration of the night is longer and days are shorter. The poet says that the duration of the night time is so long that the people cannot sleep them through. The poet wants to emphasize the fact that the nights are very long. Stanza 2. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. Stanza 2 explanation. The Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. It is a snowy area. The reindeer is an animal which is found in this polar region. People tie the reindeers to sledges, and then the reindeers pull the sledges. He adds that the children look like young ones of a bear because they wear funny looking clothes made of fur, which is like the furry skin of a bear. Hope you followed. Stanza 3. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Stanza 3 explanation. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the younger generation. The poet says that he doesn't think that the story is true, but if he tells the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. The story gives an important message. Stanza 4. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching just as he did, you know. Stanza 4 explanation. The story is about Saint Peter. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around giving religious lectures to the people, just like all saints do, then an incident happened. Hope you followed. Stanza 5. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Stanza 5 explanation. When Saint Peter was moving around the world, giving religious lectures to the people, he reached the door of a cottage where a small woman was making cakes. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace. Hope you followed. Stanza 6. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Stanza 6 explanation. As Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and was feeling weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes, and he asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. Stanza 7. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Stanza 7 explanation. The woman was selfish. She did not give cake from her store. Instead, she started making a very small cake for Saint Peter. She did not want to share her things, but when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that this cake was too big to be given to someone. Stanza 8. Therefore, she needed another, and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Stanza 8 explanation. The little miser woman thought that the cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at that cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. Stanza 9. Then she took a tiny scrap of duff and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer. But she couldn't part with that. Stanza 9 explanation. The third time she took a very small amount of duff and rolled it. The poet says that She rolled and made it very thin like a wafer and baked it. But she was so greedy that she couldn't give that thin piece of cake to the saint. Stanza 10. For she said, my cakes that seem too small, when I eat of them myself, are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. Stanza 10. Explanation. The woman reasoned that when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small. But if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen, and she did not give any cake to Saint Peter. Stanza 11. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Stanza 11. Explanation. Saint Peter became angry. He was very hungry. He was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. Stanza 12. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human farm, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Stanza 12. Explanation. Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. He added that God had given her food, shelter, fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish for all the resources she had. She did not want to share them with anybody. Stanza 13. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Stanza 13. Explanation. Saint Peter cursed the woman that hence she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. She shall become a bird, and just like birds build their houses by boring into the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day, similarly she would also work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. Stanza 14. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. Stanza 14. Explanation. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird. Saint Peter's curse had converted the woman into a bird. Stanza 15. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burnt, black as a coal in the flame. Stanza 15. Explanation. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red-colored cap on her head. This cap was there on the bird's head also, but the woman's remaining clothes had burnt and turned black in color, just like coal. Stanza 16. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Stanza 16 explanation. People who live in the countryside, even the small children who go to school, see this kind of bird in the woods. They say that she stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this kind of bird, then his elders tell him that story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy, and so she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird. They get a lesson that they should not be greedy. Hope you followed. Let's pay attention on literary devices. First one, alliteration. What is alliteration? The repetition of a consonant sound in two or more consecutive words. Stanza 1. That, they. The sound is repeating, so it is alliteration. Stanza 2. They, the sound is repeating. Look like, the sound is repeating. Funny, furry, fa sound is repeating. Stanza 3. They, them, the sound is repeating. Get, you, your sound is repeating. Learn, lesson, la sound is repeating. Tell, tale, to sound is repeating. Stanza 5. Woman, was sound is repeating. Them, the sound is repeating. Stanza 6. Faint, fasting, fa sound is repeating. Stanza 8. Still, smaller, sa sound is repeating. Stanza 9. Took, tiny, to sound is repeating. Stanza 10. Seem small, sa sound is repeating. Stanza 13. Build words, ba sound is repeating. By boring, ba sound is repeating. Hope you followed. Next literary device, simile. Comparison using as or like. In stanza 2, the children look like birds' cubs. Children compared to birds' cubs, so it's a simile. In stanza 9, baked it thin as a wafer. Cake is compared to a wafer. Stanza 15, clothes were burned black as a coal. The color of the burned clothes is compared to that of coal. Hope you followed. The next literary device, repetition. Any word or sentence is repeated to lay emphasis on it. In stanza 1, away word is repeated. Stanza 9, rolled word is repeated. In stanzas 13 and 16, boring word is repeated. Hope you followed. Thank you, friends. That's all for today. But don't forget to like it. Click on bell icon and subscribe my channel. Thank you.